They're called newcomers, as if they just appeared one day, in the 11th century, from nowhere. The Albanians, barely a whisper in the ancient chronicles, no epic, no scroll, no empire claiming their name. And yet, their DNA tells the oldest story in Europe, older than Rome, older than Greece, older than the word Europe itself. How? How does a people vanish from the written page, but leave their blood behind in every ancient grave? Because when scientists tested the bones of Ice Age hunter-gatherers, of Neolithic farmers, of Bronze Age warriors, they found something no one expected. Modern Albanians, today's shepherds, students, poets, matching the genome of Europe's first inhabitants. It's not a trace. It's a mirror. While history forgot them, their blood remembered everything. Other populations were overwritten by war, by empire, by time itself. But Albanians, they held the line. Not through isolation, but through something harder, through resistance, through surviving invasion after invasion, and somehow still keeping that ancient signal alive, like a frequency no one else could hear anymore. A forgotten harmony, a genetic melody playing since the Ice Age, still pulsing in their veins, still echoing through their mountains. And if that's true, if the Albanians are Europe's memory, then to find the first Europeans, we don't need to dig deeper. We need to follow the blood, back, before language, before kings, to the time of ice and darkness and survival, to the place where humanity hid from extinction and refused to die, the Balkans. And in that frozen silence, something ancient woke up. The ice didn't just cover the land. It silenced it. For thousands of years, glaciers swallowed the north, crushing forests, drowning rivers, erasing everything that breathed. But one place stayed alive, a narrow strip of rugged mountains and deep valleys, stretching across the southern edge of Europe, the Balkans. While the rest of the continent froze, this place stayed warm enough to hold fire and memory. This wasn't just geography. It was a shelter, a vault, a last chance for human survival. And the people who hid here, they didn't just outlast the cold. They became its children. Their blood carried the fingerprint of those earliest hunters, men and women who tracked wild horses across the snow, who lit torches in limestone caves, who left nothing behind except their bones. And now, that fingerprint has a name, U5, one of the oldest mitochondrial haplogroups in all of Europe, and still pulsing today in modern Albanians. It's not a remnant, it's a heartbeat. Their DNA doesn't just echo Western hunter-gatherer ancestry. It embodies it. The same U5 found in Ice Age skeletons is found in the women of northern Albania. The same I2 and R1b, Z2103 lineages, once buried in Balkan caves, still flow through the sons of Kosovo and the mountains of Montenegro. Other regions were wiped clean, repopulate, overwritten. But this place kept its story. Through the dark, through the freeze, through the silence. And when the world thawed, the descendants of the Ice Age stepped back into the sun. But they weren't alone anymore, because as the glaciers pulled back, something new was coming. A wave that would forever change the story of Europe. Not a storm made of ice, but of people. And not all of them came in peace. Not all of them came in peace. Some came with seeds. They didn't ride in with weapons. They walked, slowly, patiently, with baskets of wheat in fire-hardened pots. From the hills of Anatolia, they crossed into Europe, not to conquer, but to plant. And the very first path they followed led straight into the Balkans, straight into what we now call Albania. This wasn't just a new people. It was a new idea. Farming, permanent homes, clay ovens, granaries carved into rock. It was the first real revolution, and it rewired everything. But what's strange is what the DNA tells us. These farmers didn't erase the Ice Age bloodline. They blended with it. They married the hunter-gatherers who had survived the cold and gave birth to something new. The proof is still in the blood. In the women of modern Albania, we find mTNA lineages, J1CK, W1C3, N1A1A1, all signatures of these first Neolithic farmers. But here's the twist. The oldest known Albanian sample, from 800 years ago, already shows N1A1A1, meaning this revolution wasn't imposed, it was adopted. They didn't just arrive. They became part of us. In ancient graves, we see two worlds touching: Anatolian pottery beside Balkan stone tools, Neolithic farming layers built on Mesolithic hearths. A quiet fusion. No bloodshed, no collapse, just survival evolving. And for a while, the land flourished. New rituals were born. Villages grew. Culture thickened like smoke in valley air. But nothing stays untouched for long, because far beyond the farms and fields, a new force was gathering. A people with no pottery, no patience. And this time, they came not with seeds, but with horses. They didn't walk. They thundered. Across open grasslands, dragging chariots behind them, carrying fire, metal, and a language the world had never heard before. The steppe people, nomads from beyond the Black Sea. The Yamnaya. They didn't plant fields. They buried their dead beneath mounds. And when they arrived, they didn't ask. They replaced. In most of Europe, these invaders tore through ancient lineages, leaving behind only one signature: R1b, Z2103, a Y chromosome like a genetic brand, stamped across the continent. In Germany, the farmers vanished. In Hungary, the hunter-gatherers were gone. But in Albania, something strange happened. They arrived. Yes, they left their mark, buried in the bones of a Bronze Age man found in Cinemac. Full steppe ancestry, unmixed. But the rest of the population? They didn't vanish. They adapted. Instead of being erased, the local blood fused with the incoming tide, absorbing fire without being burned. And in that fusion, something new was born. The Indo-European language family began to spread, but not all tongues followed the same path. Latin grew west. Greek turned south. Slavic flooded later. But Albanian? Albanian did something no one expected. It split from the family and stood alone. It shares the roots, but not the rhythm. A language that remembers the steppe, but never bent to it. Not quite farmer, not quite invader, something in between. A survivor's tongue. And through all the iron, the fire, the smoke, the identity held. Not pure, not untouched, but undefeated. So if these invaders came with swords and genes and changed the fate of a continent, why couldn't they change this? What force kept this memory alive, even as the Bronze Age collapsed? What world was already rising beneath the ruins of Illyria? What force kept this memory alive, even as the Bronze Age collapsed? A name, almost whispered. Illyria. To Roman ears, it was a province. To ancient maps, a borderland. But in truth, it was something else. A civilization made not from conquest, but from continuity. Because when the world shifted from bronze to iron, when cities burned and languages died, something held on. The same Y-DNA lines from the steppe, R1b, Z2103, now appear again. But beside them, another voice rises. J2b, L283. A lineage born in the Western Balkans, still pulsing today in the blood of Albanians. It's not just survival, it's inheritance. From bronze to iron, through fire and silence, the same genetic threads stretch across centuries, unbroken. And while empires clashed beyond the mountains, something quiet was forming on the hilltops. The Komani Kruja culture. Hidden, strategic, layered. These weren't peasants. These were survivors, building villages beneath fortresses, anchoring themselves to old Roman roads, but living on their own terms. When Rome fell, they didn't scatter. They stayed. They took what they needed, bricks, words, coins, and wove them into something new. Pagan shrines became Christian churches. Latin prayers echoed over Illyrian bones. And in the smoke of that fusion, a new identity was forged, not copied, not borrowed, but reshaped from within. Illyria wasn't erased. It evolved. And somewhere in those villages, past the graves, past the stone walls, the people we now call Albanians began to stir. The hilltops held the last flame. But just as that fire steadied, something new was already moving. A migration, vast, unexpected, was crossing the forests and rivers to the north. And it wasn't just bringing people. It was bringing a new sound and new language. And a test that would shake everything that had survived until now. A new sound was coming. Not the clash of armor, but the rustle of forests. The slow, deep march of the Slavs. They didn't arrive like the Romans or the Yamnaya. There were no chariots, no imperial banners, just families, entire communities, pouring through rivers, forests, mountains. And in most of the Balkans they stayed. They settled, renamed rivers, rebuilt villages, planted seeds of new identity. But in one place the roots didn't take. Not fully. In Albania, the invasion came, but it didn't conquer. Because while the newcomers brought numbers, the mountains brought silence. And the silence protected what history could not. DNA tests show it. Slavic ancestry exists, yes, but only in fragments. Small percentages. Pockets of influence. 18%. 30% in some zones. But never total. Something deeper remained untouched. And the landscape tells you why. High ridges. Cold stone. Valleys where language echoes, but invaders do not last. The Albanians didn't flee. They waited, tucked inside vertical worlds, where the old bloodlines could breathe without being broken. Even their language split in two. Not from decay, but from defense. Tosk and Geg. Divided by a river, divided by time. Two voices. Same soul. One shaped by Rome and Byzantium, the other hardened in the hills, where the Slavs never reached. And beneath both the same ancient pulse. R1b J2b. Haplogroups that should have vanished by now. Still flowing strong, centuries after the invasion. They weren't erased. They absorbed, resisted, adapted, but they never forgot. And that memory, the one the blood remembers, lives in more than just genes. It lives in the tongue. Because when the Slavs came, they brought their words. But what they found was a language older than theirs. One they couldn't translate. One they couldn't replace. One that still carried something even the invaders didn't understand. A memory buried not in history books, but in sound. A memory buried not in history books, but in sound. Because when the Slavs arrived, they brought their own words, their own alphabets, their own way of naming the world. But the people they found were already speaking something else. Something they couldn't decode. Something that didn't match anything they'd heard before. Not Greek. Not Latin. Not even the other Paleo-Balkan tongues that once echoed across the region. Albanian. A language with no siblings. It doesn't belong to any known branch. It doesn't carry the full grammar of Latin, the rhythm of Greek, or the consonant dance of Slavic. It stands alone, a ghost language, still breathing. And when linguists trace it, they find fragments that go back further than expected. Much further. Words for rivers, for stones, for wind. Names that appear on ancient Roman maps, but only make sense through Albanian lips. Dreen, Met, Bune, Erzin. Not modern labels. Not foreign imports. Echoes. Even the way Albanians count by 20s, not 10s, points to something pre-Indo-European. A lost logic. A hidden code from deep time. And yet, the language didn't freeze. It evolved. It absorbed Greek, but reshaped it. Took Latin and bent it. Borrowed Slavic, then buried it in older roots. It wasn't conquest. It was alchemy. Transforming invader words until they belonged to no one else. Until they became something uniquely, entirely Albanian. And somehow, through empire, invasion, and erasure, the voice remained. Not ancient. Not modern. Something in between. Something that refused to vanish. And that's the twist. This isn't just a language. It's a survivor spell. A verbal fossil. A soundscape of memory. Not borrowed. Not imposed. This was no borrowed identity. This was memory carved into speech. But if the voice still carries echoes from the past, what else did the blood remember? Hidden deeper, locked in the bones. What else did the blood remember? Hidden deeper, locked in the bones. Turns out, almost everything. Because when scientists mapped the modern Albanian genome, they didn't find a broken lineage. They found a reflection. A mirror image of the Bronze Age Illyrians. 60% Anatolian farmer. 25% steppe warrior. 15% hunter from the Ice Age. Not close. Not similar. Identical. And yet, it shouldn't be. Not after all the wars, the empires, the migrations. Not after Rome. Not after Byzantium. Not after the Slavs. But somehow the core stayed. It didn't get buried. It held. The same Y chromosome lines that shaped the ancient West Balkans, J2b, R1b, Z2103, EV13, still pulse today in Albanian men. And they're not echoes. They're anchors. Even as new genes entered from conquerors, neighbors, travelers, the foundation didn't shift. It was like a mosaic, built layer by layer, century after century, but never cracked, never rebuilt. And the deeper researchers went, the more shocking it became. Because this wasn't the genetic story of a small tribe hidden in the hills. It was the story of a continuum, a population that absorbed but never surrendered, that adapted but never forgot. And the irony, for centuries, they were treated as a mystery, a gap in the history books, a people without a clear beginning. But now the genome speaks, and it tells a different truth. They were there, all along, not frozen in time, but flowing through it. Because this isn't purity by isolation. This is survival by resilience. The mountains guarded it. The language carried it. And now modern science has finally caught up with what the mountains always knew. But if Albania remembers the beginning of Europe, could it also remember the people who left? The ones whose bloodline jumped the sea and vanished? Could it remember the ones who left? The ones whose bloodline jumped the sea and vanished? Because this is where the story turns. This isn't just about survival. It's about memory, carried forward, body to body, century to century. Hunter-gatherers once lit fires in Balkan caves, and their DNA still burns in modern veins. Neolithic farmers shaped clay with bare hands, and those same eternal lines walk city streets today. Illyrian warriors buried beneath stones still speak, through names passed down father to son. It's not a metaphor. It's genetic. From stone tools to smartphones, one thread continues. Albania didn't just survive history. It kept it. In its bones. In its rivers. In its silence. While other nations shifted, folded, disappeared under new flags, this one remembered. Not perfectly. Not purely. But deeply. And that depth, it rewrites what we thought we knew about European identity. Because when scientists looked at the data, they didn't just see the last Illyrians. They saw something older, much older. Albania isn't just the end of a story. It's the beginning, the last living archive of what Europe once was, before the empires, before the borders, before the noise. And that means something unsettling. It means that the face you see in the mirror might be the echo of someone who lived 10,000 years ago. That the name you carry might be older than any flag you salute. That the sound of your voice is the final breath of a people no book could fully describe. This is not mythology. This is a bloodline, unbroken, unedited, undefeated. But if Albania preserved that origin, then who were the ones who left it? Because the final clue to this ancient story isn't buried in the mountains. It's waiting across the sea. It's waiting across the sea. A clue left behind on a different shore. Because just across the Adriatic, in the heel of Italy, something strange begins to whisper. Graves that look Balkan, words that sound familiar, and DNA that doesn't belong. The Messapians, an ancient tribe once scattered through Apulia, long forgotten, barely mentioned, buried in Latin dust. But when scientists tested their bones, the results cracked the silence. They carried the same lineages found in Illyrians. J2b, R1b, Z2103. The same blood that flows today in the mountains of Albania, pulsing in southern Italy. But how? No records. No chronicles. No ships carved into stone. And yet the evidence grows. Burial customs once thought unique to the Western Balkans, found beneath Apulian soil. Linguistic fragments, names of gods, rivers, villages, echoing through both lands. It's not coincidence. It's a forgotten crossing. A migration that history didn't see, but genetics did. So the question rises, did the Illyrians sail? Did part of their bloodline escape before the collapse, not to survive, but to expand? And if so, what else did they leave behind? What fragments of Balkan identity still lie hidden in the vineyards, tombs, and dialects of southern Italy? This isn't a story of roots anymore. It's a story of branches, of identity that didn't just hold its spread. And the Messapian echo, it might be the next piece, because the trail doesn't end in Albania. It continues across waters, across languages, across time. And we're just getting started. Subscribe now and join us in the next episode as we follow the trail of Europe's lost tribes.